The silent graveyard. The alien ship floated silently above the broken surface of Earth, its smooth black metal reflecting the pale, dead light of a forgotten sun, and inside the ship, the crew of the Vakar Dominion, a proud empire that ruled half the known galaxy, looked down upon the ruins of the human cities with a mixture of amusement and disgust, for in their eyes, humanity was nothing more than a short, violent chapter in a long, glorious galactic history that now belonged only to them. Commander Xylan, tall and covered in silver armor that shimmered like liquid, stood at the edge of the observation deck, his 4 eyes scanning the wasteland below, where buildings once kissed the sky, but now lay broken like the bones of some ancient beast, and with a smirk that barely hid his contempt, he turned to his officers and said, "See what happens to those who resist the Dominion. Their courage turns to dust, their hope turns to silence, and their history turns to nothing." The officers around him chuckled coldly, tapping on their holopads, recording notes, studying the dead planet, and suggesting ways to harvest whatever resources were left, and none of them, not even for a second, thought there could be anything left alive down there, because to them, Earth was a graveyard, silent and empty, a perfect symbol of humanity's defeat. Yet as the ship moved closer to the largest of the ruined cities, a strange signal crackled through the communication systems, faint and broken like a whisper carried by the wind, and although the ship's computers dismissed it as static at first, the signal returned again and again, growing stronger each time, until the bridge crew exchanged uneasy glances, because there was something familiar, something almost deliberate about the pattern. Commander Xylan ordered a scout team to land and investigate the source, and within minutes, a small dropship peeled away from the mothership and descended into the gray clouds, disappearing from sight as the crew watched its progress on their screens. But when the ship landed and the team stepped into the dust-choked streets, what they found was not just ruins. It was traps, ancient and waiting, set with precision that spoke of terrifying patience. The scout team's feeds showed crumbled skyscrapers, burnt vehicles, and tattered flags fluttering weakly in the stale wind. But as they moved deeper into the city, sensors picked up signs of movement, faint but unmistakable, like shadows darting just out of sight. And the soldiers tightened their grips on their plasma rifles, laughing nervously over the comms, trying to convince themselves it was just the wind, just the shifting ruins, just old systems sparking to life randomly. They were wrong. One by one, the scout team's signals blinked out, cut off mid-sentence, leaving only the sound of static and short, strangled screams that sent a ripple of fear through the mothership's bridge, and for the first time, Commander Xylan felt something he had not felt in decades. Unease, cold and sharp, crawling up his spine like a living thing. He barked orders, demanding another team to be prepared. But even as he spoke, the ship's lights flickered, and a low rumbling sound, like a deep growl of an ancient beast, echoed through the walls, shaking the very metal of the mighty Vakar ship. And when the technicians checked the sensors, their faces paled, because somehow, something was rising from beneath the earth, something old, something angry. The ship's AI suddenly screamed warnings across the bridge. Unknown energy surge detected. Hostile activation in progress. And before anyone could react, the main view screen cracked and glitched, and an image burned itself onto the screen. Not a monster, not an alien, but the face of a human soldier, worn and scarred, eyes burning with hatred and cold fury. The soldier did not shout, did not threaten, did not even raise his voice. Instead, he simply whispered one word, a word that every alien in that room somehow understood, a word that seemed to echo not just in their ears but in their bones. Awakened. And then the screen went black. For the first time since conquering 1,000 worlds, the Vakar crew stood frozen, their hearts pounding, their hands trembling, as they realized the terrible truth that no history book, no report, and no elder had ever warned them about. Humanity was not gone. Humanity was not broken, and humanity was most certainly not defeated. They had only been waiting for the moment when their enemies would become arrogant enough, foolish enough, and blind enough to step onto Earth's soil once again, waiting for the perfect moment to rise. And now, the galaxy would learn a lesson they would never forget. The Vakar ship hovered ominously above the surface of Earth, its sleek hull reflecting the dim, eerie glow of the dying sun as it loomed over the wreckage of once great cities. The crew on the bridge was still rattled, their confidence shaken by the message they had just received. A message from a human soldier. For the first time in their long reign of terror, they had underestimated their enemies. The very thought of it gnawed at Commander Xylan's mind as he clenched his fists, pacing back and forth, unwilling to show fear to his officers. "Send another team," he barked, his voice tight. "I want answers. Now." The orders were given with a cold edge, but inside, Xylan's mind raced. He had studied every battle in the galaxy, learned from every empire's fall, and yet here he was, facing an enemy he had thought long dead. His stomach churned with something he had not felt in centuries: doubt. Below, the alien forces made their descent, landing on the outskirts of the destroyed capital city, which was now nothing but a ghostly shell of its former self. The once majestic skyscrapers were now twisted and bent, their jagged remnants sticking up like broken teeth in a decaying jaw. The wind howled, carrying with it the scent of something long forgotten, and the dust swirled through the empty streets as if the planet itself was waiting, holding its breath. The second team that Xylan dispatched landed without incident. They stepped out of their ship, their boots crunching against the ash-covered ground, their eyes scanning the surroundings. At first, everything seemed eerily calm. The kind of calm before a storm that even the most seasoned soldiers knew to fear. They moved cautiously through the streets, weapons ready, their comms silent except for the occasional murmur of orders. "We're going deeper," the leader of the team, Captain Werthor, said over the comms. "We'll find out what's going on, and we'll deal with it." His voice was steady, but it carried a warning. They were no longer dealing with just ruins. They were walking into something far darker. As they made their way further into the heart of the city, they noticed something strange. The remnants of human technology that had once been thought destroyed. Shattered computers, rusted military gear, and broken weapons lay scattered across the ground. But it wasn't just the items themselves that were odd. It was the way they were arranged, almost like pieces of a puzzle, scattered out of place, waiting for something to come together. The deeper they went, the more unsettling it became. The air felt heavier, the temperature colder, and the shadows in the corners of their vision seemed to flicker and move. Arthur glanced over at his team, but it was hard to tell if the others were just seeing things or if the planet itself was playing tricks on them. But one thing was certain: they weren't alone. A sound echoed from a nearby alley, soft at first, like the faintest rustle of fabric. It was the kind of sound that would have gone unnoticed in any other place, but here, in this deathly silence, it stood out like a scream. Arthur raised his hand, signaling his team to stop. His heart pounded in his chest as they waited in the dead stillness. Then, out of the darkness, a figure emerged. It wasn't human, or at least not entirely. It stood upright, cloaked in rags and dust, with hollow eyes that glowed with a strange, unnatural light. The creature's skin was ashen, its face twisted in a silent scream, and its arms, long and thin, stretched unnaturally, as though they had been twisted by some unseen force. The alien soldiers raised their weapons, but before they could react, the figure spoke. Its voice was low, almost like a whisper, but it echoed through the streets like a thunderclap. "You should not have come." Before anyone could move, the creature lunged, its speed unbelievable, and in one swift motion, it tore through the nearest soldier. The sound of tearing metal and flesh filled the air, and the soldier's scream was cut short. In the chaos that followed, the team opened fire, but the creature moved with a deadly precision, dodging the shots like a shadow. It was too fast, too powerful, and soon, More figures began to emerge from the dark corners, each one more horrifying than the last. "Retreat!" Thor shouted, but it was too late. The street was now alive with movement. Human soldiers, or what was left of them, rising from the ruins, their eyes burning with an ancient, vengeful fury. These were no mere ghosts. These were warriors, once lost but now awakened, filled with a rage that had been building for centuries. The aliens fought back desperately, but for every soldier they took down, two more seemed to appear. The darkness seemed to press in around them, the very air thick with hostility, and every corner of the ruined city now felt like a trap. Just as the last of Thor's men fell, he found himself face to face with the leader of the creatures, who stood still, watching him with cold, unblinking eyes. The human soldier, his face a twisted mask of pain and anger, said only one word before vanishing into the darkness. "Awakened." As the light from Thor's dying ship flickered and died, the Vakar crew on the mothership watched in horror. The signal from the ground had gone dark, and all that remained was the sound of static. The once confident commander, Xylan, stood frozen, his mind reeling from the realization that humanity had never truly been defeated. It had only been waiting. And now, it was time to pay the price for underestimating them. Back on the mothership, Commander Xylan stared at the flickering holographic screens, his mind unable to comprehend what had just occurred. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for the communicator, sending a signal to his fleet. The ground teams had failed, utterly and completely. The battle below was unlike anything they had anticipated. And it wasn't just the monstrous beings that had overwhelmed his soldiers. It was the sheer determination of the humans that had been buried under layers of time and myth, now rising from their long slumber. "Commander, we've lost contact with the surface teams." The report came from his communications officer, and it felt like a cold slap to his face. It wasn't just a tactical failure. It was a devastating loss of life. And the enemy had not even revealed the full extent of their power yet. Xylan swallowed hard. Prepare the fleet for immediate departure. He didn't need to say more. The look in his eyes said everything. They were no longer fighting a rebellion or a resistance force. They were facing an ancient enemy who had not only survived but thrived in the darkest corners of history. Humanity had never truly been gone. They had only been waiting, watching, and now they were ready to strike. The Vakar fleet, once so certain in its superiority, now sat at the mercy of the unknown. Ships shifted uneasily in the vast expanse of space, the crew on edge, as if they, too, felt the weight of the looming threat. But no one could have prepared them for what was to come next. The Earth was not just a lost planet. It had become the home of something far more terrifying than they could imagine. The humans were not the weak, helpless species they thought they were. They were a force of nature, a storm that had been brewing in silence for centuries, and now it was time to unleash its fury. As Xylan paced in the command center, trying to make sense of the chaos, the lights suddenly flickered. The tension was thick, the air crackling with anticipation. And then, as if to confirm their worst fears, the communication channels blared with an incoming message. The speaker was garbled at first, but soon, the words cut through the static like a sharp blade. "We have seen your kind before, Vakar. You come, you conquer, you destroy. But not this time. Not this world." The voice sent chills down Xylan's spine. It was human, no doubt about it. And yet there was something about it that was different, something ancient and primal, like the voice of a being that had lived long before any of the stars were born. This was not the voice of a lost civilization begging for mercy. No, this was the voice of someone who had nothing left to lose, someone who had risen from the ashes to remind the galaxy that the humans were still here, and they would never be forgotten. "We are the forgotten warriors, the ones who once stood against the greatest of empires, and we will do so again." Xylan's breath caught in his throat. He knew of these legends, of course. The humans spoke of them often in their war stories and tales of old. The warriors who had fought against the gods themselves, the ones who had turned the tide of battles that had once seemed inevitable. But Cylon had always dismissed them as mere myth, nothing more than stories to scare children. Now, in the silence of the mothership's command center, the legend had come to life, and it was terrifying. "Prepare for battle," Cylon growled, forcing the words through his clenched teeth. He knew that his fleet stood little chance against this new, unpredictable threat. But he had no choice. The Vakar had come to conquer Earth, and they would not leave until it was in their grasp, or they were wiped from existence. As the fleet began to move into position, Cylon watched the stars above, his mind filled with doubts. He had never known true fear before, not like this. The Vakar had conquered countless worlds, destroyed powerful enemies, and outlasted entire civilizations. But nothing had ever prepared him for the wrath of humanity, a wrath that had been building for centuries in the shadows of forgotten ruins. Below, in the ashes of the cities, the humans gathered. They were not the weak, cowering survivors that the Vakar had hoped for. No, they were warriors, led by ancient generals, heroes, and legends of old, their minds sharp and their spirits unbroken. They had been waiting, surviving, and learning. And now, they were ready to show the galaxy just what humanity was capable of when it was pushed to the edge. The ground began to shake as a massive, hidden military base came to life, its long-forgotten engines roaring back to life. Beneath the rubble, old weapons that could match even the most advanced alien technology, began to stir. The Vakar were about to face humanity's true power, and they had no idea what was coming. "Prepare to engage," Cylon ordered, his voice filled with a grim determination. There was no turning back now. The battle had begun, and humanity was not going down without a fight. The sound of heavy boots echoed through the metal corridors of the Vakar mothership. The crew, once so confident in their power, now moved with unease, the tension palpable. The screens in the command room blinked red, alerting them to the incoming threat. But this was no ordinary enemy. No, the humans were more than they had ever expected. They were not mere survivors clinging to the scraps of their world. They were warriors, born from the ashes of a civilization that had been forgotten by the galaxy. Commander Cylon stood at the front of the bridge, his hands clenched into fists, his mind racing. The fleet had regrouped, ready to engage, but the feeling in the air was unlike anything he had ever experienced. There was something different about this battle, something he couldn't put his finger on, but it made him uneasy. "They're coming, Commander." The voice of his second-in-command, Lieutenant Terran, broke through his thoughts. She stood at the console, her eyes scanning the incoming data, her face pale. "We've detected their war machines. They're massive, unlike anything we've ever seen before." Cylon's heart sank. The war machines had been hidden beneath the earth, in forgotten underground bases, waiting for the moment to rise. The humans had known their time would come, and now that moment had arrived. They were no longer the fragile species they once seemed to be. The earth had shaped them into something new, something powerful. "Ready the weapons." Cylon's voice was cold, determined. The fleet had to hold its ground. There was no retreat, no turning back. The Vakar had made their move, and now it was time for the humans to show them just how wrong they were. The battle began with a deafening roar, as the Vakar ships opened fire on the approaching human war machines. Bright beams of energy lit up the sky, lighting the darkness of space. But to their surprise, the human machines didn't fall. Instead, they powered up their weapons, returning fire with an intensity that shook the very fabric of the universe. How is this possible? Cylon muttered to himself, staring at the screens in disbelief. The humans' machines were unlike anything they had ever seen. They were fast, powerful, and their technology was advanced in ways that were impossible to understand. But it wasn't just their machines. It was the humans themselves, the way they'd fought, the way they'd moved, the way they refused to surrender. On the ground, the human forces fought with a fury and skill that left the Vakar reeling. There was no fear in their eyes, no hesitation in their movements. They were relentless, charging forward as if they were fighting for something far greater than their own survival. And with each passing moment, the Vakar fleet began to feel the weight of their mistake. In the distance, the Vakar ships began to fall, one by one. Each explosion shook the mothership, and Xylan could feel the strain in his chest. They were losing, and the more they fought, the more it became clear that humanity's will was unstoppable. "Commander, we're losing communication with the ground units." The voice of the communications officer rang through the room, and Xylan's stomach twisted. The humans had taken out their communication towers. The Vakar fleet was now isolated, cut off from their ground forces. "No," Xylan whispered, his voice breaking. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. This wasn't supposed to be their fate. The humans had been written off, thought of as weak and unworthy of consideration. But now they were proving the galaxy wrong, and the Vakar were paying the price. The command room grew silent as the reality of their defeat set in. Xylan stood frozen, watching the chaos unfold on the screens. His mind raced for a solution, but every option seemed impossible. The humans were everywhere, in the skies, on the ground, in the air. They were unstoppable. Then a new signal came through the ship's main communication channel. It wasn't a warning. It wasn't a threat. It was a message. The voice was calm, but carried a weight that sent chills through Xylan's spine. "You thought we were finished. You thought we were easy prey. Now you will learn what happens when you mistake humanity for weakness." The voice was filled with an eerie confidence, one that made the hairs on the back of Xylan's neck stand up. This was no ordinary speech. It was the declaration of a species that had been pushed to its limits, a species that had survived for a reason. And that reason was now clear. Humanity would fight back. They would reclaim what was theirs, and they would make sure the galaxy knew that Earth was not to be underestimated again. Xylan knew it now. He understood the depth of his mistake. "Prepare for impact," he yelled, his voice filled with desperation as he turned to his crew. But it was too late. The tide of the battle had already turned. The Vakar fleet, once so sure of its victory, was now in chaos. The humans had awakened from their slumber, and they were far more than anyone had imagined. As the final blow was dealt, Xylan could only watch in horror as his empire crumbled. Humanity had proven its strength, and now it was their turn to make the galaxy suffer. The stars above Earth burned bright, but their light seemed dim compared to the fires that raged across the battlefield. The humans had turned the tide. What had once been a galaxy ruled by fear and dominance was now shaken by the brutal awakening of a species thought to be on the brink of extinction. As the final remnants of the Vakar fleet staggered in retreat, their commanders knew that nothing would ever be the same again. On Earth, the human forces pressed forward, unstoppable in their pursuit of victory. Every machine, every weapon, and every soldier fought with the singular purpose of ensuring that their enemies would never make the same mistake again. Their resolve was unshakable, and the lessons learned from their past had made them stronger. The past was behind them, and the future was now within their grasp. As the last Vakar ship was disabled, floating aimlessly in the vastness of space, the human forces took a moment to regroup. The skies, once filled with chaos, now began to settle. The battlefield, though still scared, had transformed into a symbol of human resilience. Commander Sarah Williams, the leader of the human war effort, stood at the center of the control room, her eyes glued to the large display screen. Victory was in their hands, but she knew that this was only the beginning. The Vakar were not the only threat in the galaxy. This battle had made it clear that humanity had emerged from the shadows, and there would be other powers who would seek to destroy them. Sarah's mind raced. What would the galaxy do now? What would the Council think of humanity's defiance? And most importantly, what did this victory mean for the future of Earth? As she stood deep in thought, her second-in-command, Lieutenant Marcus Trent, stepped up beside her. His face was a mixture of pride and caution, the gravity of the situation clear on his features. "Commander, we've received transmissions from the Galactic Council. They want a meeting." Sarah's eyes narrowed. The Galactic Council had been watching humanity for years, silently observing as Earth's civilization rebuilt itself after the destructive wars of the past. But now, they were coming to them. It was no longer about diplomacy or aid. Now, the Council wanted to discuss the reality of the human strength, and perhaps, they feared, the power that Earth now held. "What are they saying?" Sarah asked, her voice steady, betraying none of the concern she felt inside. "They want us to attend a summit. They say they are concerned about the balance of power in the galaxy." Sarah knew that the Council was scared. Humanity's rise had upset the natural order. The Vakar had underestimated them, and now the galaxy would be forced to reckon with what Earth had become. "We're going," Sarah said with a certainty that left no room for argument. "But we go on our terms. The galaxy needs to understand that humanity is not here to beg for peace. We're here to lead." The Council's words meant little to her now. What mattered was the message humanity was about to send. They had already proven their strength on the battlefield. Now it was time to prove it in the halls of power. Back in the stars, the remnants of the Vakar fleet drifted in disarray, their defeat reverberating through the galaxy. It wasn't just the humans they had underestimated, but the collective will of an entire species that had fought, struggled, and rebuilt itself. The Vakar had believed themselves to be untouchable, but humanity had proven them wrong. And as the stars blinked in the distance, it was clear. Humanity had just begun to make its mark on the universe. Across the shattered remains of the Vakar Empire, their enemies' fear of Earth was growing. The galaxy could no longer deny it. The humans were back, and they were a force to be reckoned with. The Vakar's defeat was not just a setback. It was a statement, a warning to any who would challenge humanity. But even as they celebrated their victory, the human leaders knew that this was only the start of something much larger. The galaxy had never seen the likes of humanity before, and now that it had, things would never be the same. The reckoning had begun, and the galaxy would soon learn. Humanity would not be so easily forgotten. The galaxy had never been more divided. News of humanity's victory spread like wildfire, reaching every corner of the galaxy, from the farthest, uncharted systems to the grand halls of the Galactic Council. For decades, the Council had operated under a carefully maintained balance of power, where established empires and alliances controlled the flow of resources, technology, and political influence. But now, one species had upended that balance: humanity. As Earth's representatives prepared for the summit, tension gripped every ship, every outpost, and every corner of the galaxy. The Vakar had underestimated the humans. Now, the Council feared that the new players on the stage would destabilize the status quo. The strength of humanity could no longer be ignored, and the Council was left with a difficult decision: how to deal with this unexpected power. In the heart of the Galactic Council's massive meeting hall, representatives from every known species took their seats. The room buzzed with whispers as delegates from the most powerful empires in the galaxy exchanged nervous glances. The vaunted leaders of the Galactic Council, an assembly that had long been the true rulers of the galaxy, stood ready to welcome the humans. But there was no warmth in their welcome. There was only suspicion and cold calculation. Commander Sarah Williams, along with her closest allies, stood before the Council's grand table. As she gazed out at the sea of alien faces, she could sense their unease. They thought humanity was a mere accident, a species too insignificant to threaten their dominance. Now, Earth's people had become a symbol of defiance, an embodiment of the strength that had long been dormant. "The galaxy is watching you, Commander," one of the Council members, an insectoid alien known as Saltric, spoke up. His voice was both menacing and measured, like a predator toying with its prey. "You believe you can just waltz in here, arrogantly demanding respect, when your species has been nothing more than a nuisance for centuries." Sarah stood her ground, unwavering. "We don't need your respect. We've earned our place among the stars. What we demand is a seat at the table. As equals, you will either grant us that, or we'll make you regret it." Her words hung heavy in the air. The council's silence was deafening, as the alien leaders exchanged uncertain glances. This was not the response they had expected. For centuries, they had kept the galaxy in check, manipulating events from the shadows. No one had dared to challenge them, until now. Humanity, it seemed, was the exception. "You have no idea what you're up against," Saltric sneered, leaning forward. "We've seen what your kind is capable of, but you cannot grasp the full scope of the power we wield. You will learn that the hard way." Sarah's eyes narrowed, her voice steady as steel. "You're wrong. We already know what it's like to be underestimated, to be crushed under the weight of larger powers. You will not break us. You will not control us. Humanity is stronger than you realize, and you will either accept us or face the consequences." The room was filled with an almost electric tension as the council deliberated in hushed tones. Outside the meeting room, the ships of Earth's fleet hovered in the distance, a silent reminder that humanity was not afraid to fight for its place in the galaxy. For a moment, it seemed as though the entire galaxy might hold its breath. But then, the doors to the council chamber opened, and the lead council member, an imposing figure named Arcthus, stepped forward. His towering form, a being of energy and dark matter, cast a long shadow over the assembly. "Enough," Arcthus said, his voice deep and resonating. "The council has deliberated, and we have come to a decision. Humanity will be allowed to join the council as an official member, under one condition." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "And that condition is that you prove you can control the forces you've unleashed." Arcthus' words were laced with a threat. "If you cannot, then you will be treated as a threat to the peace of the galaxy. We will not tolerate chaos." Sarah stood firm, her expression unreadable. "We've already proven we can handle ourselves, but we're not here to play by your rules. You'll either respect humanity's place, or you'll face the consequences. And trust me, you won't like those consequences." Arcthus studied her carefully, as if weighing her resolve. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, he extended a hand. "Very well. But remember, humanity's place among the stars will come at a price. The galaxy does not forget easily. We will be watching you closely." Sarah extended her hand in return, a gesture of defiance and diplomacy. "We'll be ready." As the summit ended and humanity's official membership in the Galactic Council was secured, the galaxy was left to wonder. Was this a new beginning, or would humanity's rise lead to the galaxy's downfall? One thing was certain: humanity had proven it would not go quietly into the night, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The galaxy, once a place of fragile peace and carefully negotiated balance, was now in chaos. Humanity's presence in the Galactic Council had set off a chain reaction that no one could have predicted. The fragile alliances between powerful species began to unravel, and old grudges resurfaced. The news of humanity's rise, and its undeniable strength, had sparked fear in the hearts of those who had ruled the stars for centuries. Sarah Williams, commander of humanity's forces, watched as the galaxy spiraled into turmoil. Despite their official acceptance into the Council, the threats that had once been whispered in the dark corners of the galaxy had now become open declarations of war. Humanity's enemies were not just a few rogue factions. Entire civilizations were plotting to crush humanity before it could fully establish itself as a power. It was clear that humanity's place among the stars would not come without a fight. "The battle is not over yet," Sarah muttered, standing in front of the war table aboard the Eclipse, humanity's flagship. Her crew was scattered across the galaxy, spread thin between countless fronts. Their fleet was impressive, but it was still too small to take on the combined forces of the galaxy's most powerful empires. The comms officer stepped forward. "Commander, we've received word from the Thalic Alliance. They're mobilizing their fleet. They want to strike us down before we can even fully integrate into the Council." Sarah clenched her fists. Let them come. She turned toward her crew, the weight of her words sinking in. We have fought for everything we have. We fought for our freedom. We fought for our right to exist. And now we fight to defend everything we've earned. Humanity will not bend. We will not break. The crew members exchanged glances, their expressions filled with a mix of determination and resolve. They knew what was at stake. This was no longer just about survival. This was about proving to the galaxy that humanity would not be erased, that they would not be made to shrink back into the shadows of history. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, a war was brewing. The Thalak, a race known for their immense size and terrifying firepower, were mobilizing their fleet. They had never faced humanity in battle before, but they were determined to put an end to this new power that threatened to disrupt everything they had worked for. Their vessels were swift, built for overwhelming force, and they were coming for Earth. We can't wait for them to come to us, Sarah said, her voice filled with urgency. We need to take the fight to them. The crew responded in unison, their voices a chorus of agreement. The time for waiting was over. It was time for humanity to take control of their destiny. As the Eclipse and the fleet of human warships jumped into hyperspace, they didn't just travel across the stars. They crossed a line that had never been crossed before. Humanity was no longer a pawn in the game of galactic politics. They were a force to be reckoned with. They were taking the fight to their enemies, no longer asking for permission. The battle for the future of the galaxy had begun. The Thalak fleet appeared on the far side of the system, their massive warships emerging from hyperspace like a storm. Their engines glowed with a deadly red hue, and their weapons systems hummed with lethal intent. But humanity was ready. The Eclipse and its fleet were already positioned, their guns powered up and their shields raised. This wasn't going to be a slaughter. This was going to be a test, not just of strength, but of will. All hands, brace for battle. Sarah commanded as the first wave of Thalak warships advanced. The two fleets collided in a flash of light and sound. Missiles streaked through space, deflecting off shields. Lasers cut through the darkness, and ships exploded in fiery displays. But humanity was not unprepared. Their warships were nimble, their tactics unpredictable. They were a species that had never known the luxury of complacency, and it showed in their every move. "We're holding them back, Commander," shouted the tactical officer. "But we need to press the attack." Sarah knew that this wasn't just a battle for survival. It was a statement to the galaxy that humanity would no longer be pushed around. This was a battle for their future, for their right to stand tall among the stars. With a grim determination, Sarah gave the order. All ships, push forward. Show them the strength of humanity. The human fleet surged forward, smashing into the Thalak lines with unmatched fury. Explosions rippled through the void, and in the chaos, the Thalak were forced to retreat. But this victory was only the beginning. The war was far from over. As the Thalak fleet scattered, Sarah stood at the helm of the Eclipse, her heart pounding. The galaxy would never forget this day. Humanity had fought back. Humanity had shown the galaxy that they could not be erased. And now, they were a force to be reckoned with. But the war was just beginning. There were still many enemies to face, many battles to win. But for the first time in history, humanity had stood tall, and the galaxy would never be the same again.